Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CDL podcast. I'm your host, as always, Ryan, and today we've got a lot to unpack. This is the night. I believe it'll be going up at night after the day of Champs. This is being recorded probably about 3 to 4 hours after the Champs final. I've had a little time to take some notes, write down some thoughts, look over some stats, kind of piece my thoughts together. So yeah, we're going to be talking all Call of Duty League Champs weekend, all 4 teams, but mostly obviously going to be focusing on a lot of the grand final and some takes from it and stuff, as that was obviously the most important, and I wish it was the most interesting, but to be quite honest, it didn't end up being the most interesting series of the weekend. Probably was the least interesting series of the weekend. But the series before that were pretty awesome. The London, Chicago, and the winners final, losers final, they're all actually pretty good series, so at least we got some good COD this weekend. But before we get into the video, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, especially comment for more CDL content. We're still on the road to 200 subs here on the channel. And before I forget, I know I'll forget if I start getting into the teams too much. This is kind of like a smaller piece of news that I have highlighted here. But before I forget, as I know I will, I saw on like Twitter or something that the broadcast today between the main stream that they had, the normal CDL stream, and then the partners like Courage and like Vicstar, I think, who did like a co-stream on YouTube. They broke the Call of Duty League record and the CWL record as well too. Any COD tournament with 331 or 332k concurrent viewers, which is shattering a new record for any COD tournament, which is super cool to see. I mean, on a pretty bad game like Modern Warfare, if you will, it's pretty cool to see that they were able to crush a concurrent viewers record, because that just shows that if we were to get a game that was liked by the viewers as much as like a Black Ops 3 or Black Ops 2 or Black Ops 4, especially with Treyarch coming up, that we could maybe even shatter that record and the league could be going to a special place. And then before we get into like more takes and such, I just want to go over the championship weekend as a whole. So we're going to get into it a little earlier than we normally do, but we're going to talk about the matches and stuff, kind of going in order from like losers final to winners final, or to losers semi, and then the winners final down to losers final, and then the grand final. So in the first match, we saw Huntsmen take out London. There's honestly no shock here. To be honest, most people expected Chicago to win. I think the only people that really expected the Ravens to actually win it were probably Ravens fans. I did think they had a fighting chance, especially if Chicago and Scump formal teams, if they came out slow as they're known to do. I thought there was a chance maybe London could pull off an upset, but I picked the 3-1 Chicago, and that's exactly what happened here. So not too much of a shock. Envoy looked incredible in the series here, and I thought Huntsmen were actually poised to make a run to the finals. If you follow on Twitter, I did say my predictions for the weekend were that Chicago was going to take out London, and then Chicago was going to take out Dallas, and then go on to the final and lose to Faze. Obviously, that was very wrong because Dallas was unstoppable this weekend. But I didn't think that the players of Huntsman caliber would be denied in most cases, unless they ran into a buzzsaw like Faze or Dallas. But yeah, not much to talk about here. Huntsman kind of dominated the matchup, like you would figure. London put up a great fight, and then more on London to reflect on their stellar season. They finished 4th place at the Call of Duty Championships, when most people would probably pin them as like a 6th or 7th best team in the league this year. I think obviously you would probably put Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas ahead of them the whole year, as you should. And then you probably would put Florida over the course of the entire year ahead of them. Most people would. Some people would put New York, and some would put Toronto. So that would pin them as like the 6th or 7th best team, depending on if you would put teams like New York and Toronto ahead of them. That'd put them at like 5, 6, or 7. So by this standard, they outplayed their expected outcome and performed pretty well. I think they have like 4 sticking points on their roster. I think like Wuskin and Scraps as a main AR and a flex, and even Scraps can play a sub. I think they're like franchise type pieces, especially with the personalities they have. They bring in a lot of fans. So not only are they franchise players in terms of in-game talent, but they also have a lot of personality that they bring to the table, which is something that can be rare somewhat in Call of Duty, and especially when they're representing their home country. They're super popular over there, so I think it would be very important for Wuskin and Scraps to stay on the roster. And then I think also Zero and Dylan should certainly stay on the roster. Zero can be like your flex or second AR. He is more naturally a main AR, so him and Wuskin could run the 2 AR setup with Scraps on like a flex, and then Dylan on a sub, and then maybe Jerd could be reintroduced to the lineup if their relationships aren't too bad after this year, because he could play at a pace with Dylan. And usually he's pretty good at Treyarch titles, making a grand final in BO3 champs. And he was pretty good at the beginning of Black Ops 4. He's the best shot punch player in the game, I swear, all year. So maybe he could be reintroduced or infused that as a fast sub to help out Dylan, because Shawnee can't really play a fast sub, and neither can Scraps, Zero, or Wuskin. So that's why I say if they don't introduce Jerd, I don't think Shawnee can be that fast sub, and I think they do need one more faster player on this roster to keep up with Dylan's pace. So if they had Jerd, or maybe add like a faster sub. I don't know about AMs in Europe. I don't know if there are any really good UK AMs that are fast subs. I'm sure there's got to be some. So maybe they could add somebody to the roster. Somebody like Alex maybe could come onto the roster as a sub to pair with Dylan. But I love their outlook for the future. I think they're going to continue to be a top 6 team next year as long as they keep the roster relatively the same. And then in the next match, excuse me, we saw the winners final, which was Faze versus Dallas, and Faze fell 3-2 to Dallas. There's honestly not too much to say on this match either, because I'd rather focus more on the grand final, even though this match was way better. But Faze threw away so many man advantages in that map 5. They honestly should have won it. I think they ended up losing it like 6-3 or something. But they had so many man advantages, like including like the dagger round was like shottzyy clutching a 1v2, and I think it was Crim and shottzyy or Clay and shottzyy clutching like a 2v4. They were just completely, Faze was just completely out-prepared by Dallas. Dallas looked like they came into this match completely ready to go, had all their research done, and Faze looked like they were just going to bank on their talent in this matchup. So Faze falls to losers. And then in the losers final, we saw Atlanta versus Chicago, kind of a marquee match. At that point, I think it set the record for most viewed match in Call of Duty history. Or at least in CDL history. I don't know about Call of Duty history. I think there might be some Black Ops 3 or AW finals that had more. But after map 1, honestly, I thought Chicago had it in the bag. They dominated by 90-some points, which normally sometimes isn't a domination, but in Modern Warfare, winning by 90 points is a pretty big statement. Then they just honestly collapsed in that search. I think they were down 4-2. Chicago was down 4-2, and then all of a sudden they were up 5-4, and they had some man advantages in many of those rounds on the way early in the game that they should have won. They threw so many man advantages in many of the rounds, and they honestly blew that map. And I strongly, strongly believe that if the Huntsmen... sorry, I got something in my throat or something. I strongly believe that if the Huntsmen close map 2 out, they win the series. I don't think players of that caliber are going to be reverse swept for top 2 at champs. When you got like Scump Formal, who are world champs, Arcitys and Prestinni defending world champs, and then Envoy, a player who seems to always step up in the clutch and is obviously one of the MVP candidates this year. I don't think players of that caliber are going to be reverse swept when it's shot at grand finals is on the line. So I think if Huntsmen were able to get up 2-0, they win that series either 3-0 or 3-1, and even if it gets to a map 5, I'm still taking them because I just don't think they'd be reverse swept if they're up 2-0. But I think after that collapse in map 2, kind of like what happened at champs last year, when they could have gone up 2-0 in winners finals when they were up like 5-3 on payload, and then they blew that lead, and then they just collapsed and didn't win a map for the rest of the day. They collapsed here in this map 2, and then they didn't win a map the rest of the series and were eliminated. I think it's something similar to that. But to kind of do what we did with London and touch on the Huntsmen's overall season after being eliminated, it was truly an up and down season. I mean, players of that caliber are going to expect to win almost every event they're at. They're going to expect to be in the grand finals of champs or win it because they have to hold themselves to that standards. They're some of the greatest players of all time, so anything less than a win in every event for them is going to be considered disappointing to them. Not that they should be expected to win every event, because at this stage when the competition is this tight and there's so many good players, I mean, there's no way that any team could win every event. But they're obviously going to expect that of themselves as a competitor. And I think they would have been the second best team in the league behind Faze had the whole season been on LAN. I think the top 3, Dallas, Atlanta, Faze, still would have been the top 3. But I think Chicago, or as I said, Dallas, Atlanta, Faze, Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, I think still would have been the top 3 teams on LAN. But I think Chicago would have edged Dallas out at number 2, and Dallas would have been 3. Although any of them could have won one on any given day, so Dallas still could have won champs on LAN. But Scump and Formal this season showed that they clearly still have it. They're still top players in the game. Envoy proved he is a young franchise piece for Hecz to mold into a superstar personality as well as a superstar player. And then Arcitys cemented himself as one of the best. And I actually believe that Prestinni won over some Huntsman fans. People were kind of gassing him when he first came, and then they started to hate him during champs. And then all of a sudden he performed really well in the clutch, so they loved him again. Although it is a weird situation with their roster if it goes to 4v4, because I feel like the odd man out is definitely Prestinni. I mean, you've got T2P, Formal and Scump are not being dropped. Arcitys played so well this year, I have to believe he isn't getting dropped. And then Envoy was an MVP candidate, so I have to believe he isn't being dropped. But at the same time, I think Arcitys wants to play with Prestinni now for the rest of his career, so I don't know how he'd feel about Prestinni being dropped. So I could also see a situation where Arcitys wants to go play with Prestinni, so he decides to leave, and then Dashy comes on. So I could see like a Scump, Formal, Dashy, Envoy roster working out, although Dashy always wants to run the main, and Formal's not going to give it up. So I wonder how that would work in 4v4, but we'd have to see. But overall, I believe the Huntsmen have a lot to build on. If it stays 5v5 and they stick with this roster, I think they'll be right back as a top 3 team next year with a chance to win any tournament they go to. But obviously, they're going to be disappointed in their season because players of this caliber expect to win champs every year. And obviously, they can't do that. But that's the standard they're going to hold themselves to because they're such great players. Overall, up and down season, but a lot of positives to take for the Huntsmen. Next was the grand final. And what the hell happened? Dallas smoked Atlanta 5-1. Obviously, they only won 4-1 in maps that were played, but they had the 1-0 advantage coming from winner's bracket. And honestly, there's just one word that sums it up for me, and that's preparation. If any of you guys see Kyle, he's commenting on the videos, almost every video, basically, for the last few months. So shout out to him for his support, but he's one of the people that I kind of like DM during matches. We kind of talk about the matches, our thoughts as we're going on. It's super fun. We get somebody else to talk to during matches. It's kind of fun. Like, sometimes he offers insight on the stuff that I would have never thought of, and it's like, wow, that's actually really good. And then a lot of times you'll hear me talk about it in the podcast because guess what? I don't know everything about COD. I miss a lot of things, and I'm sure I catch things that you guys miss, and you guys certainly catch a lot of things that I miss, like he always does. And this is one thing we really agreed on was preparation. It was the key word of this matchup. I think you can still make the argument to this day now that Faze was a more talented team than Dallas. And honestly, I think they truly do have more talent. I'd be willing to go on record in saying that Faze has more talent than Dallas pretty easily. But on the other hand, the talent on Dallas isn't that far behind Atlanta. But how prepared they were and how prepared they were, especially compared to Atlanta, easily outweighed that small talent gap. The one thing like I took from it, and I didn't really know how to say it cleanly, so I kind of tried to write down what I thought, and then I could summarize it. But it literally looked to me like this match was a match that took place in the first month of the game, and FaZe were still trying to learn it. But Empire was a team that had been playing it for a full year, and then they had access to the game for a full year longer than FaZe, and then FaZe was still learning it, and Empire just came and stomped them because they simply just knew how to play the game better. It looked like one team was playing at champs and one was playing in the first month of the game. It was that bad. Just complete domination from the Empire in terms of preparation. I think FaZe ended up having like better KDs towards the end of the series, or they were close. But I mean, Empire just completely dominated this matchup. Preparation-wise, they just looked like every rotation, every search, they just knew what they were doing, and FaZe was on their back heels, their back foot, like every time. So honestly, Empire, they cement themselves as the best team of Modern Warfare, undoubtedly, in my opinion. You can say online all you want, and I honestly do think that Empire probably doesn't win champs if the whole season was on LAN, but guess what? With the way the world is right now and the state of the world, online was what we were given, and they took full advantage of it. You can't fault somebody for taking full advantage of the situation they were given, especially when everybody was put in the same situation. Everybody had the chance to take advantage of it. Empire seized it, and props to them for that. And specifically on their team, if you've been listening to the pod for a while, you know one of my favorite players in the league, a guy that I love, and you'll see a theme. I love a lot of the Halo guys as I kind of came from Halo. I'm so happy for Huke specifically. I love the guy, and I think he deserves this ring so much. He's been one of the best players in COD since we saw him in AEW, and then he had to take a break and come back in World War II. He's been one of the best players every year. He's one of the most talented FPS players we've ever seen. He's been a Silver Surfer and just not able to take advantage of some good teams he's had. And like he said in a tweet, like, this year, you know what? My stats took a dip, probably my worst year statistically, but I accepted the role player role. And honestly, it feels good, and he wins a championship. And to me, that's such a big thing. You see guys, even in regular sports, like basketball, Melo, a guy that was a superstar early on in his career, he's still damn good, but he's not a superstar anymore, but he can certainly contribute as a scorer on a team. And for a while there, like on OKC and on the Rockets, he didn't want to be on the bench, pretty much refused to be on the bench. So he tried to continue taking a starting role, and then he was out of the league for a while because, honestly, people just didn't want him as a starter chucking 25 shots a game. Now he takes a more diminished role with the Blazers still starting, but kind of like the third option on offense. And all of a sudden, he rejuvenates his career. Kind of not that Huke needed to rejuvenate his career because he's still considered a top player, but instead of trying to put up all the stats, he kind of let shottzyy and Illey do their thing, put up the stats, and he kind of did the dirty work. And super cool to see a player like that be humble enough to say, you know what, I'll start doing the dirty work. I'll run trophy smoke instead of being able to run dead silence and stun and play for my stats. And I'm gonna just take it on head on and become a role player. So that's really cool to see. And then as for Atlanta, it almost feels like a disappointing season for them, which is weird to say because they won multiple events. They were consistently in finals. They didn't miss a semifinal, but their ceiling always felt like so high to me. They had the talent to win every tournament. They're one of those teams, but they fell short so many times to lesser teams that you feel like they shouldn't really lose to. Like, they were definitely better than those teams. But I don't know. This isn't really a knock on them at all, but I don't know. I just feel like they should have won a lot of the events that they didn't end up winning, and I feel like they should have also probably been able to win champs. Obviously, based on the result that we saw, Dallas was clearly the better team, but I feel like based on Faze's talent and having such a good coaching crowd, they should have been able to figure it out and come more prepared, as they were just completely outmatched in the preparation, like I've said. Dallas completely outplayed them, deserved to win it, all that. But I feel like Faze should have come more prepared. And I feel like Faze is the most talented team. They should have won champs. They just weren't able to put it all together. And if it is 5v5 next year, they can just keep this 5-man roster, and they have potential to run the entire league again next year. They're nasty. They could easily win every tournament that they go to. They could win champs next year. This team that they have now is absolutely disgusting. If they can maybe figure out how to play the game a little more structured. But if it goes 4v4, to me, you drop Major Maniac, have Cellium as your main AR, Priesta as your flex, and then Simp and Abezy, the Tiny Terrors on subs, and good luck ever beating that team. That team would be insane. Matching up against a team I might talk about a little later, I would love to watch that matchup 100 times. I would never get bored of it. We'll touch on that when I get to my takes a little bit. So like I said, I'm a little disappointed they don't get more wins, but they're absolutely a disgusting team, so I don't have that many negatives on them, to be honest. They were just out-prepared for this weekend by a team with 2 veterans that have been there, done that, a lot more than they have. So props to Dallas, and not a disappointing season at all for Atlanta. Now on to an MVP segment. These MVPs for me are all based on like champs as a whole, not only championship weekend, because it's such a little sample size of stats that I think it's hard to just like say like, oh, well, Clay went off championship weekend or shottzyy went off championship weekend. Let's just solely give it to him. I think it's kind of tough to do that. So instead, it's going to be based on like all of the weekend. So basically, we're going to rule out London because they only won one map on the championship weekend and bowed out at 4th. So I'm going to actually kind of default it to the top 2 teams that made the final. I think eliminating worthy people like Scump from consideration, although he obviously like Scump and even like guys like Arcitys or Formal might deserve consideration. But I'm just going to say losing team MVP has to be from the team that took 2nd and then winning from the team that took 1st, just to default it and kind of weed out some of those guys. So to me, the losing team MVP has to be somebody from Atlanta since they made the finals. And I'm going to give it to the guy that I personally thought might have been the best player in the world in Black Ops 4 and in Modern Warfare. And I thought it was ridiculous that he wasn't even a candidate for regular season MVP because I thought he might have been the regular season MVP, and that's Abezy. He had a 1.1 this tourney, which was the 2nd highest on his team behind Cellium with his 1.14, even though he plays a much harder role than Cellium because he's the entry sub, the entry guy that's going to drop insane 1.1 stats on you consistently. He's the most consistently high KD for an entry sub. It's absurd the numbers this guy puts up. He might be the best entry guy I have ever seen. I might take him 1st overall in a draft. If we're building my team and I have 1st pick, I might take Abezy. There's not a guy besides like young Scump that could be like an entry type player, even though Scump didn't really play entry. He just played more of like a Slayer with nade shot in front of him in those younger days. But I might not take a single player. Abezy to me is easily the best entry sub in the game. I'm probably taking him 1st overall if he's drafted, and to me he's the losing team MVP, no doubt. And I think he might have been the regular season MVP. I think he is the best. He might be the best player in the world right now. Kind of a hot take there, I guess, maybe you might say. And then I strongly disagree with who was chosen as the winning MVP. And I guess I don't really know if if they're considering it like just the finals MVP or if the overall champs MVP, it should be the overall champs MVP because that's obviously how they got to win champs was through all those matches ahead of them too. They gave it to Crim, which his interview was amazing. Crim is the best at interviews. But to me, it wasn't Crim, it was Clay. He had a 1.19, which is by far the highest KD of any player who made it to championship weekend. He was super clutch in the winners finals, game 5. Leading to so many of those countless like 2v4s and stuff that they had on Atlanta. And then his leadership and having everyone on the same page in those listen-ins, which is honestly what won them that final, like I said a million times, so easily, that their teamwork that he was kind of the leader on. So Clay was the MVP for me. He should now be a 2-time champs MVP. Obviously, did not deserve it in Black Ops 4. He didn't get it, Simp did, which was completely deserved. But Clay was the MVP, I believe, over Attach in AW. So I think Clay should have got this one, and he'd be a 2-time champs MVP. I think he'd be the only guy to have done that, unless maybe actually is Crim a 2-time MVP? Did Crim win it in Ghost or did Damon? Crim might be a 2-time MVP. I should have done my research on that before. So Crim might be a 2-time MVP, but I know for sure Clay would have been if he would have gotten that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the weekend's matches. I think we're going to move on to some hot takes from the weekend, or just takes from the year and the weekend that I'd like to touch on. So the first thing I want to touch on is Dallas proved the point again that KD is not everything. That argument that people always have about KD, how important is it? It certainly does matter. I mean, if you're dropping a 0.4 every match, you're doing something so wrong that you're holding your team back. And if you're dropping like a 1.7, that also means you're probably doing something wrong. You might have just gone crazy, but you could just be stat padding and baiting your teammates way too much. But Dallas certainly proved that KD is not everything this weekend. They beat Faze twice with pure beautiful teamwork. They obviously also slayed with them and kept up with them, but it was mostly based on pure beautiful teamwork. And I didn't think that any team could make MW look like a work of art through teamwork like you could in other titles, but they got as close as possible. Like when I talk about making it look like a work of art, I think of like Optic in BO3 when they were down like 14-0 going into second half of Breach Uplink versus Rise, and the beautiful teamwork it took for them to make that comeback from down 14-0 in one half, or like the 12-0 or whatever it was comeback, Envy versus United on IW, I can't remember the map, Uplink, when they did that listen-in, probably the most beautiful piece of artwork of teamwork you've ever seen. Or like 100T at times last year when they were at their peak, just absolutely beautiful teamwork. They can make the game look like art. They know where you're spawning at all points. They have the perfect rotations, the perfect hardpoint setups to not break. And I didn't think MW could ever look like a work of art through teamwork, just because squad spawns are so inconsistent. You can't always predict where people are spawning from. There's not really gunfights in the game because of the headshot multiplier. You can just smoke people instantly. But they made it look like as close to a work of art as possible. And back to like the KD thing that I'm talking about here is Clay had a 1.19 this weekend, which is absurd stats for a main AR, even that's really good at champs. But nobody else on their team was even really above a 1. Sorry. They were either maybe just above like a 1.02 or they were even below. They were just all right around it. So if you look at like Faze or Huntsman, they had 3 or 4 players each above a 1. I think like Scump, Formal, Arcitys, and Envoy on the Huntsman were all above a 1, and then Prestinni wasn't that far below it. The only reason Prestinni was a little lower is because he struggled against Faze and I think like New York in those first few matches. And then on Atlanta, I know like Cellium, Priesta, Major Maniac were all above a 1. And Abezy, they were all above a 1, and then I think Simp was slightly below, and shockingly Simp was around a 1 or even a little lower, which is super low for his standards, but 1 slightly off event for that beast is nothing to worry about. Dude is still one of the best players in the world, could go down as maybe the greatest of all time if he continues. But these stats just show that KD isn't everything once again. I mean, Huntsman had 4 guys above a 1 that had really great looking stats on paper. On paper, KD-wise and stuff, Atlanta probably was the best looking team, but the team that had like 1 guy above a 1 in Dallas and a bunch of guys around a 0.9 was the team that comes out on top because they were able to keep up in the slaying department, like right around Atlanta and Chicago, but they were just absolutely able to dominate through beautiful teamwork, communication, and setups, and preparation and strategy. I mean, I almost forgot. I didn't even mark this down in my notes to talk about that. I didn't even really know that was a spot. I saw it. I work for the CCL, the College COD League, and I saw it once in our playoffs, but I kind of forgot about it. And then, like, what was that spot I saw? Illey on Gunrunner. He was like all the way in the back of the map, looking through like 2 buildings in a truck onto that B bomb site. That spot, like, that's just that's preparation, because you know when he shot, Atlanta had no idea where he shot from. They were looking, and somebody challenged it again, and he hit markered him or something, and they had no idea where he was shooting from. That's just pure preparation. That's another, that preparation like that is another thing where KD doesn't matter, because sometimes you can have better setups than other teams that they might not even know as a spot, and that's all due to preparation. That has nothing to do with KD. And then another thing to touch on quickly, not really a take or anything, but Modern Warfare is done competitively. I'm super happy with that. Many of you know that this is no doubt the worst competitive COD we have ever had, by far, not close, no debate. You can never convince me otherwise. And I cannot wait to go back to Treyarch on a game set in the 1980s. In my opinion, the most fun to play and watch Call of Duty of all time, competitively only, not including pubs, is Black Ops 3, followed by Black Ops 2. And maybe even followed by Black Ops 4. I really like to watch and play Black Ops 4. And if there's a common theme there, that's 3 Black Ops games, 3 Treyarch games. We're going back to Treyarch. I'm pumped, to say the least. And then the other funny thing about Modern Warfare being done, another thing I didn't even think to write down in my notes, but they're having like that 1v1 like all-star game type thing where, like, I think the regular season MVP, finals MVP, and then like one player from each team or something is playing like in a 1v1 tournament or something. And I think it's hilarious that the community is trying to rally together and vote Octane in, because we all know Octane hates the game. He even said today he got fined more than the Seattle Surge team winnings were from tournaments this year, which is funny. But I think it's funny that the community is kind of rallying together. That's why I love the COD community, the competitive COD community. They're rallying together to try to vote in Octane as the Surge representative in the 1v1 tournament, so he has to reinstall Modern Warfare and hop back on it, even though he said he never played again. So I think that's super funny. And then another take I'd like to offer on the CDL as a whole this year is the fact that I think it showed crazy promise. That like 331 or 332,000 concurrents that were on the stream or whatever today is absurd numbers. And it shows that in a Treyarch year, COD could become a top esport, I think. Because think about it, this game is, although it's super popular because of Warzone, competitive-wise, many people aren't watching this year. I know, like, I have plenty of friends like from back home and stuff that are usually always watching competitive COD, but this year they couldn't. They were like, I just hate this game so much I can't play it, I couldn't watch it. So like they lost numbers on that, and a lot of people I think were like that. A lot of like the people that really know COD and have been in it for years were like, man, I just only tune on and off this year because the game is just so bad. So to hit those numbers on a game like this where a lot of people are saying it's the worst competitive COD ever is pretty insane. And I think in a Treyarch year, if we have like a Black Ops 2, 3, 4 caliber game in viewership, it could become a top esport. But I think in order to help this, we need expansion, and we need it now to make the league more interesting. We need bigger tournaments, bigger champs, teams that don't have a bye basically into the finals. So especially if we're going 4v4, we need at least 4 new teams, so we're gaining 4 roster spots, because if we gain 4 teams, we gain 4 roster spots if we cut it down to 4v4. But if we cut down to 4v4 and we don't gain any new teams, we're losing 12 roster spots, which, I mean, the roster spots are already extremely limited in comparison to what they normally are and probably should be this year. So if we lose 12 more spots, we're going to lose out on a ton of legends or young guns that deserve a spot in the league. And I think it's looking scary for expansion, because I think there are people like Rise and other teams that would maybe want to get in, even maybe like United if they could raise funding. But I think it's going to be hard to convince a lot of organizations, like parent organizations, to want to get into the league right now, because the numbers on the financials probably don't look too great, seeing as they weren't able to host any events this year. So I can't imagine that the financials are looking as good as they projected them to be. So if they go to a business and say, hey, look, we were projected to make this much money and we missed our mark, I don't think a lot of people are going to want to invest in that, but I truly hope they do. Also, I think there are going to be a lot of roster shakeups. I mean, we have guys like JCap, Chino, Enable, Looney, Dashy, Aches, Lacefield, Brack, Mox, and then even guys in like the amateur scene like Parasite, Nagafen, Fellow. We have so many guys, Royalty, Goonjar, that are all on the bench or in the AM League or not in the league at all. And I think it might be one of the most crazy roster manias we ever see. If we see expansion and no 4v4. So if we expand by like 4 teams and we stay 5v5, it could be insane if we see 20 new roster spots. All those guys I just listed will certainly be on rosters, as well as maybe guys like Fire from the AM scene, or Standy, or Diamond Con, or guys like that. We could see a lot of familiar faces back in the league, which I think would only help the league. However, staying on the roster mania topic, my one wish for roster mania, if I had to do absolutely one thing and wish one thing and like speak one thing into existence, it is that whether it's Gunless and Looney being let go from their contracts, which I think is certainly possible. They both ended up on the bench, didn't play much, doesn't seem like they're going to get back on their roster. If they both get let go, and then all of these players, I want them all to go to a Rise Nation, if you know who that is from the old days, the Black Ops 3 days, stuff like that. And then mainly this team is from the World War II days. I want to see like a Rise Nation expansion team, or this team could go to OGLA because Tejan Slasher would be on it, and I think OGLA is probably going to activate like the +1 option on the contract of Tejan Slasher and keep them. I don't know why they let them go. So I want to see a Rise Nation reunion plus Kenny. I think if it's 5v5 and you've got Slasher on the main in a Treyarch title with Gunless on the flex, the best flex in the world, I think Gunless is. I don't even think you can really debate that. He's the best flex in the world. The only other guy you can maybe say is like up there with him is Priesta as a flex. And then Looney on the other flex. And then Kenny and Tej on the subs, or maybe Kenny on the flex and then Looney and Tej on the subs. But either way, that team is disgusting. Slasher and Looney kind of as the leaders, Gunless as just an absolute killer, Tej as your entry, and then Kenny as your sub slayer. I think that team would be almost unbeatable. And then if it is 4v4, to me, you just say, sorry, Looney, you're not on this team. You go Slasher on the main as the leader of the team. Gunless, the best flex in the world in 4v4 on the flex. Kenny, to me, arguably the best sub in the world at times, and then Tej as your entry. I think Kenny and Tej can compete with anybody on the subs. Only sub duo I'd say is probably better than them is like a Simp Abezy, and then the only sub duo that's on like a level with them is maybe like a Scump Envoy. But I think a Slasher, Gunless, Kenny, Tej team would almost be unbeatable on a Treyarch title with normal spawns, normal maps, anything, and I need to see that now. I want that team to happen bad, and I think it's actually certainly possible. Then lastly, kind of for like the hot take section, I want to hear one from all of you. So either drop me like a question in the comments for a Q&A video, or offer me a hot take. And if you do have a question that specifically, like some people have questions that they want answered like when I reply back to them in the comments, but if you have a question that would be specifically for a Q&A video, mark it as such so I don't all of a sudden respond to that part in the comments. I can rather save them for video. So if you get to this point in the video and you're listening, drop a question down below about something about the COD League, anything, how I got into COD. Then maybe we'll use it for a Q&A video here in the off season. But that is going to do it for this final episode of the MW season here on the CDL podcast. It's a decently short one. I think it's going to be around like 30 minutes, but that gives you a little bit less of a drawn-out podcast to listen to. Got concise and to the point, got a lot of information on it, I believe. But yeah, this is the final episode of the MW season. Crazy to think about. I think this is like the 22nd episode, 22 episodes deep. And I'm still going to be trying to come out with a podcast or other COD video weekly to keep the content coming, especially involving roster news and stuff like that, roster rumors, ranking rumored rosters and stuff. But I want to truly take the time out to thank you guys for the support this season. I honestly started this podcast. Quarantine was coming around. I was bored. I was watching a lot of COD, doing school, had a lot more time on my hands, and I started this podcast honestly hoping to get a few views a podcast, maybe get a couple people that would comment so we could talk about it and stuff. Here we are, getting a couple hundred views consistently. Some videos almost like nearing like 700 to 1,000 views. We're not even on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and stuff like that. I think in the off season that's going to be one of my projects, is working to get on there, because I think we could expand our viewership a lot more if we were on there and grow this community even larger. So honestly, like I said, I started this hoping maybe to get a few per podcast, few comments, few subs, and we're a couple hundred consistently with over 100 subs. It's still just unbelievable to me. I love all you. Thank you so much for the support. It's been an unreal journey so far doing this podcast. And please be sure to leave a like, comment, and sub for more CDL content if you enjoyed this one. Especially comment down below, like I said, those Q&A questions and your hot takes and thoughts on this Champs Weekend and the season as a whole. And I'll be sure to see you guys in the next one. Like I said, the grind will not stop this offseason. I'm going to keep trying to pump out like a weekly podcast or some kind of content. Like I said, love you guys all. Thanks so much for the support. Thank you for watching this one, and I will see you in the next one. Hope you guys enjoyed Champs.